I am almost certain a subject like this will cost me subscribers, but I didn't start this channel to amass a horde. I started it to have fun and occasionally talk about serious things. This is one of those serious things, so if you watch my stuff for the obsessive takes on anime, comics, video games, and sci-fi, this is not the video for you, although I do appreciate those who watch it and put up with my occasional serious videos. This was not the video I planned to make next, but I want to get this off my chest. Nikhil Clayton, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, and for once, I do not care. This individual has lost any respect I had for them. Why is that? In a recent video, they said something either intentionally misinformative or out of such massive ignorance on a subject that it is actively dangerous. Nikhil claimed that there was a paranoia about transgender people in sports. In a comment, I called him out for this. Here is my exact comment. There is no actual paranoia about trans people in sports. Many of them have made it provably unfair to actual athletes. Just look up the male swimmer who sucked at it in the male division and suddenly transitioned and began quote-unquote winning in female swimming events, while still fully biologically male. This is not a matter of paranoia, it is a matter of fairness to the athletes. Please double-check your facts before making such statements. Now, most creators would have probably thought for at least a few minutes before responding to that, or even not have responded at all. Whether or not they agreed with me would depend on a number of factors, but the response would certainly have been at least somewhat thought out and not been instant. In this case, Nikhil responded almost immediately, within a minute or two, so likely right after reading it, if they even did. And I'm not sure they even had time to process it because their response was verbatim. 1. It is a reaction channel, I'm not researching any statement. 2. This is the exact paranoia I was talking about. You're almost verbatim Principal Kelly right now, LMAO. Right. So the reaction channel thing is understandable to an extent. You're not doing research about a subject in the middle of a reaction video. I get that. But when somebody points out your factual and statistical error, and your response is to call them a bigot, I honestly don't believe you deserve a platform, especially one where you might do this again. For full disclosure, my response to his response was again, verbatim. That swimming thing actually happened. It was outright unfair to the female athletes who put everything they had into it to have a fully biological, physically superior male compete. Also, verbatim what Kelly said? Kelly is a bigot against people for no other reason than he views them as dangerous and abnormal. I do not view the person who stole those wins from other athletes as anything less than human. I do, however, view them as extremely dishonorable. They were fully aware of their own nigh insurmountable advantage and still went through with their actions. I have no problem with trans people in general, only people who would use an unfair advantage against the people who have actually sweat and bled for their craft. I do not understand why you see that as paranoia, but it is honestly disturbing that your first reaction was to call me a bigot. Now, Leah Thompson, the so-called athlete that stole those victories from the biological female swimmers, is only one example of this, and frankly, despite being the most well-known, or at least one of the most well-known, might actually be the least egregious, and that is saying a lot. There was a seemingly biological male boxer allowed to fight in the Olympics. I say seemingly because whether or not that individual is biologically male has been a subject of consistent debate. If that person is in fact scientifically and biologically male and was allowed to compete in a combat sport against biological females, they could have easily severely injured or crippled their opponent, and no, that's not the point of boxing. The Williams sisters, you know, some of the best female tennis players in the world, maybe some of the best female tennis players to ever live, once had exhibition matches with a male tennis player named Karsten Brock, who was not one of the top male tennis players in the world. In fact, his training regimen was said to consist of a pack of cigarettes and multiple bottles of lager, and he won without effort, while even claiming to have been holding back to make it more fun. This may be why Serena herself once said on a talk show that male and female tennis were essentially completely different games, and that Andy Murray, a very good professional player, would have no difficulty beating her at tennis, going so far as to claim she would not be able to score a single point against him. Yeah, one of the best female tennis players to ever exist does not believe a biological male in a female sport is fair, even if that is not quite how she phrased it. I will have that interview linked below in the description. This is made worse by the actual reason Nikhil brought up trans athletes within the context of the show he was reacting to. He was reacting to an episode of X-Men Evolution. A really good show, but that's beside the point. He compared people in the show pushing mutants out of sports while using fairness as an excuse to do so with the so-called paranoia about trans athletes in sports. Yes, he actually did this. So, for those who have never seen this show, why is this a problem? Well, it's a problem because at no point in the show, at least up until this point, does any mutant taking part in sports use their abilities to intentionally cheat. Jean does not use her telepathy or telekinesis in any of her sports. Spike wouldn't really be able to use his powers to his advantage in either basketball or skating. And even Quicksilver, a petty thief and a guy introduced arguing with Spike about who was a better basketball player, doesn't seem to ever use his super speed in basketball. And we know, or at least relatively certain he doesn't, because he isn't considered definitively the best on the team, even though going a little faster than anyone else on the team without being noticeably superhuman would be absurdly easy for Pietro. The only competition-like setting we see any of the mutants use their power in is in fights and in the danger room. No sports, though. We do not see a single mutant in any sport gain an unfair advantage through their differences, at least up until this point in the series. It has been a while since I've seen the rest of the show. The mutants are being harassed and persecuted out of sports for their differences, regardless of whether or not those differences are used, or even could be used to their advantage in said sports. It is shown in the show itself to be the equivalent of being banned from a sport because of your skin color. Spike cannot use his powers in basketball or skating. They do not work that way. Jean hypothetically could use both of her powers to cheat in any sport where knowing what your opponent is thinking or telekinesis would give you an unfair advantage, but she would have to actively choose to use said power, and the latter would be incredibly noticeable. It is not the same thing as a fully biological, unaltered male competing in a female sport because, and I shouldn't need to tell anyone this since it's so obvious even a toddler could see the problem, but a biological, unaltered male is physically stronger, faster, and has more stamina than a biological female of approximate age and health. This isn't just scientifically proven fact, it is common knowledge at this point, and has been for a very, very long time. And by very long time, I mean most of human history. A biological male, even one who has gone through hormone therapy, is scientifically going to be stronger and faster than a biological female of similar age and fitness. And usually not just slightly either. It will usually be an insurmountable difference in physical ability. The fact that Nikhil thinks for even a second that it is somehow paranoia is so fundamentally absurd that I can only believe they are actively gaslighting themselves into believing something that is provably false and even dangerous. A biological male competing in a sport with biological females doesn't stop being unfair to the biological females just because the biological male identifies as female. At the highest extremes, a biological male competing in a combat or contact sport like boxing or rugby or American football, without actively holding back, could accidentally severely injure or even kill a biological female opponent. This isn't bigotry or paranoia, it's not even a dislike of trans people in general. It is a fundamental scientific difference between biological males and biological females that makes almost any physical ability-based sport played between them grossly unfair to the biological female. For the sake of completion, I will point out that maybe a biological female competing against biological males in a competition such as gymnastics could hypothetically give an advantage to the biological female being naturally more limber. I don't know the specific rules governing gymnastics, so I'm not sure, but it definitely seems plausible. So this isn't even a one-sided thing. It is very clear that most physical sports are separated by gender for a very good reason. And that reason isn't bigotry or paranoia, it is fairness and maybe, even more importantly, the safety of the athletes. My final thoughts on this. I do not want to think Nikhil is a bad person. I honestly prefer to think this was simply an example of a person speaking about a subject they are passionate about but ignorant of, and then becoming overly defensive. I have personally done similar before occasionally. I myself have even been known to passionately discuss a subject or two I enjoy but am not well versed in. The difference there is that if someone pointed out that something I said was fundamentally provably wrong, my first instinct was never to directly insult them. To insult them with a provably false insult, no less. I honestly really liked Nikhil's content, and I hope that this was simply a matter of ignorance or Nikhil somehow gaslighting themselves into believing something. But I am jaded enough at this point in life to realize that may not be the case, and Nikhil could simply be the kind of person to respond to someone pointing out basic factual issues with personal attacks. I hope that's not the case, but like I said, I'm pretty jaded at this point in life. Well, that's all for now, and since my normal sign off would be rather inappropriate here, I'll just say thank you for listening.